Genesis 26:18 tells us Isaac dug again the wells of Abraham.
In every generation, there have been revivals, massive moves of the Spirit that changed the course of history. In every revival, there were believers like you who chose to answer the call, to become the one in their generation. Discover your call to be the one in your generation.
We're about to take you face to face with history. Welcome to Revival Radio TV. I'm Dr. Gene Bailey. I am glad you're here today because today, if you've got kids, if you've got young kids, you've got old kids, you've got kids that you don't know what to do with, you're going to hear a story today that I know is going to bless you, and you're going to see God's faithfulness. Right now, I want to introduce my guest today is Dean Sikes. Dean, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
And the beautiful plush welded sets of Revival.
There you go.
TV.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So, Dean, I want people to know your story. Those of you that are familiar with Kenneth Copeland Ministries, seen you around and seen your involvement and at the church, obviously. Right. So give us what happened in your story.
Sure. I grew up in church, became a Christian at a very young age, was probably part of what society says is just that typical middle-class family, loves God and goes to church, you know, and that was my life. But I didn't know God. At 15 years old, my world was radically shaken. 60 seconds changed my life. At 15, I was sexually abused. And I never saw the attack of the enemy coming. You know, I was a popular young teenager. I had a lot of friends and always involved in just different stuff. But at 15, when that abuse happened, it so shook me to my core that I shut down. And in the process of that, I lost me. And I became a very fake, plastic individual. At 17, 2 years later, I refused to dress out in PE. And so as a junior in high school, I failed PE.
Sure.
It wasn't because I wasn't athletic. I just wasn't going to dress out.
Yeah.
And I learned two lessons during that conversation that I had with my father when he looked at my report card. He said, "There's no way to fail PE." I said, "Dad, there's a way to fail PE." And because of what had happened to me at 15, I began to lie. My drug of choice was lying. I lied so much you had to catch me telling the truth.
Yeah.
That was my life. And the two lessons I learned was I never again failed PE, but more importantly, if you and I don't pay the price, we're going to pay a price. And I share with teenagers that everything that you do in life is a seed, good, bad, or indifferent, and it's going to produce a harvest. Go forward 3.5, 4 years, 21 years old, had buried the pain. Pain seeks pleasure. I had become a very angry, hurtful person, hurting people, oftentimes hurt people.
Right.
I was the poster child for arrogance and stupidity. And at 21,
there's a lot of us on that.
Well, I got the T-shirt. At 21, I went to God, whom I did not know, and said, "I don't think you're real at all. But if I'm wrong, and if you have a plan for my life, I need you to prove it. I've heard about you all my life. I've been in church every time the doors were open. Great parents, great family, great friends, Christians, all of that. But I don't know you." I had no faith in that prayer whatsoever. As soon as I prayed it, I was on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my office. I'd been at lunch. It was a beautiful March afternoon. It was very breezy outside. I remember the sun was really shining. And I walked into her office, said hello to Sharon, our receptionist, walked down the hallway, turned right, walked into my office, shut my door. We built and developed shopping centers up the Eastern Seaboard at that point in my life. And while dialing a phone in my office, off behind me to my left, I heard someone say, "Call Mom." I immediately turned to see who was in my office. I saw no one, but yet I had just heard, as clearly as I hear your voice, right. I heard "Call Mom." So I dialed 344-7443. The phone rang 6, 7 times. On the 8th ring, my mother answered the telephone. And when she said hello, instantly I knew something was really wrong. For in that moment in time when God, who is very real, spoke to me and said, "Call Mom," at that precise instant, my mother was attempting suicide. She was dying. And Gene, I ran out of my office, I jumped into my car, I drove up Interstate 75 to a little community called Ottawa, Tennessee, and I talked to this God I did not know. And suddenly, out of my heart and through my lips, I was confessing scriptures that I had learned way, way back at 10 years old. And I drove into my parents' neighborhood, and from the outside in, everything looked fine. It was home, you know, safe, secure for people to live. But from the inside out, my mom was dying. Over these last 25 plus years, I've seen millions of teenagers. And from the outside in, they appear to have it all together. But from the inside out, they're in their own private wars. That day I beat on the door. My mom came down some stairs, barely alive. She opened her front door, fell into my arms. I put her in her car, drove her back down Interstate 75 to a hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And as we drove, she said one sentence. She says, "I can't be dying." I said, "You're not going to die, but you're going to have to choose to live." The Bible says, "Choose you this day."
Right.
Got her to a hospital. A doctor threw me against the wall, rushed her to the emergency room. My dad's there, family and friends have arrived. 45 minutes later, this doctor from the ER walks over to my dad with the most bewildered of looks on his face. And I will never forget his sentence. He said, "Mr. Sikes, there is no medical reason whatsoever to tell you what I'm getting ready to tell you. It is a, quote, miracle of God. Your wife is fine." And I stood there and I went, "You've got to be kidding me. You're real."
Yeah.
And I went around a corner. I leaned against this long hallway in Park Ridge Hospital all by myself. And I had an encounter with Jesus. And it was like a warm oil hit the top of my head and went to the bottoms of my feet. And all the pain, the anger, the frustration began to be awakened and began to leave. And I heard the Lord say, "I got something I want you to do." "Yes, sir." "I want you to go speak to teenagers." "No, sir." "That's not my calling."
Anything else you got?
Yeah, surely there's something else up there you've got for me to do down here. But became very obvious very quickly. That's what he wanted me to do.
Now, had you back when you were 15 and the situation that happened, had you dealt with that?
No.
So now you're in your 20s at this point. So now you're realizing not only did God do a miracle for your mother, you realized he was real, but you had to also deal with everything that had happened.
Yeah, well, and I tell teenagers this every day on the road. If you and I don't deal with our emotions, our emotions are going to deal with us.
Right.
Well, I didn't deal with mine for 20 years.
Explain
it's because internal reality becomes external reality. If a young person or if a young person goes through life having pain and they never deal with it, it's like compounding interest. It's not going anywhere until we allow Jesus, the healer, to touch us and come in and go, "Okay, I want to take that out of you." He'll knock on the door, but he won't blow the door open. And so for 22 years, I never did that. I never dealt with it. I mean, I was in full-time ministry, married with 2 of our 3 children, and my life unraveled. When 22 years after I was sexually abused, I walked into a Home Depot with 2 of our children, walked around a corner and into the person literally who 22 years earlier had abused me. My life was, I went to a couch and could not get off my own couch. I was on TBN, on Daystar, INSP, and I could not function outside of where I was anointed.
Right.
And 5 years into our marriage was when this happened. And Lori, my wife, said, I called her one day and said, "Hey, we're going back to where we spent our honeymoon. The kids are taken care of. Just get ready. We're going. I'll be home in an hour." And she said, "Honey, I love you. You're mean. Everybody thinks you're so great. They don't know you. Don't come home until you get help. I'm not going anywhere with you." And she hung up. I was like, so I called her right back and she sent me the voicemail. And I went home and I packed a bag and I drove 323 miles. And I sat down with a Christian counselor who asked me one question, and I talked for 3 hours. The next morning, he asked me 2 questions, and I talked for 90 minutes. And then I drove 323 miles home, and I cried almost every mile. And in that time of driving, my car was invaded by the Spirit of God. And he said, "This is what the process is, so I can use you. You have to break so I can put you back together." And in that breaking, in that submitting, in that yielding to him, it began a journey with me that says, you know what? Everybody has something broken on the inside of them. I see a lot of hurting teenagers.
Right.
But God has a way of meeting us where we are and taking that pain and transforming it into a purpose that I never even dreamed I would get to do what I get to do today. But God had a plan.
Obviously, things worked out with your wife.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's my best friend. What happened was when I told her that I ran into this person, she was the first person that I ever told that I'd been sexually abused. She was the first person I ever really trusted to invite them into that pain.
Right.
And she looked at me and she had the most confident look on her face. She says, "Everything makes sense now."
Yeah.
She said, "We got to get some help." She said, "I love you. I'm not going anywhere." She said, "But now it makes sense."
Yeah.
And we began the process of getting better.
Isn't that amazing how the enemy keeps you from the very thing that you needed?
Oh.
she was there to be with
the entire time. Yeah. Oh, it's oftentimes teenagers, especially, will run from instead of running to. I tell parents when I speak with the parents, if you're a safe place to hear bad news, you're doing your job right.
Right.
But if all your teenager ever tells you is how great their life is, something's up. Pay attention.
Right. That's interesting. That's a good way. Something's up if everything's all great.
Yeah. If everything's great in the life of a teenager and they never have any issues.
Okay. You know, this program we talk about the revivals, and we have, you know, you see history all around us in revival. But this is the reason I really wanted you to come on and show this is because there are two reasons. Number one, not all revivals are, I had a broke arm and look, it's healed, you know, or something's radically happened. There's these, you went through your own personal revival, obviously, that you had to deal with.
Yes.
So tell me about that first time you went to a school and you're going to share with teenagers.
It was in February of 1993, Lithia Springs, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta.
I know where it is.
I showed up. I brought a guy in to do music, a guy named Charles Billingsley. Just got a phenomenal voice. He showed up in a pair of blue jeans and a Troy Aikman sweatshirt.
He's a good man.
He's a good man. I brought in a guy named Billy White Shoes Johnson from the Atlanta Falcons, and I brought in Miss Georgia to speak. And I spoke for about 15 minutes, and I showed up in a pair of suit pants, a white starched shirt with presidential cufflinks and a tie, and I spoke, and I wondered when I got through, why are all those students running over that young man with a sweatshirt on? I just shared my heart, and God began to show me the power of relatability.
Right.
You know? And so it kind of changed through the years, and I began to, because I never wanted to be I never asked to be a speaker. I didn't want to do this. But God had a plan. And I said, well, just show me then how you want me to do this, because my way, I don't even want to do it, periods. And man, he began to show me, and kids began to relate. Because when you get real, you become relatable. That's part of the greatest lesson. When you get real,
you become relatable.
Yeah.
Now, that's not only just good with kids, it's good with everybody, all of us.
Yeah, it's life.
When you become relatable, then you've got an entry.
Yeah.
So tell me about, okay, so now you've been doing this for 25 years and counting.
And counting.
So tell us give me some stories of what happened at schools.
You know, I've spoken at schools, I've had school shootings. We've gotten the calls from those principals saying, we've heard about your message.
Before you get into that, you don't do just this is the thing I want you to understand. Dean isn't in private Christian schools only, right?
No. The first 10 years, I did all public high schools.
Right.
And the second 10 years, we did all private Christian schools. And I was frustrated because I knew there was more. And so God took me to Job 33:4 that says, the Spirit of God made you and the breath of the Almighty gave you life. Then he ran me over to Proverbs 24:11 that says, deliver those who are drawn toward death, hold back those stumbling to the slaughter. He said, I'm going to give you a plan where you can go into public high schools and Christian private schools and share a message. And so now, we've done over 3,000 schools. And probably 19 to 2,000 of those have been public.
Most of Christians are like me going, how in the world do you get in the public schools and share this message?
God. Yeah. I mean, that's all. I can always share my testimony, what I've shared with you, right? And then we had somebody say, well, you can't come in here and say what you want to say. I said, I'll tell you what. They said, you know, we're going to make sure that you're watched. I said, let's do this. You film every single syllable that comes out of my mouth. And they did. I said, now you just watch what happens. And I told the students, I said, listen, because we're in this public school, I can't give an invitation. I can't get you to come forward. But if you want to talk to me after, when I take my speaker's hat off and I just go over there and my guy standing against the wall, if you want to talk, I'll be there. For 45 minutes, over 200 students stood in a line for no other reason to tell me their story.
Wow.
And see, I tell young people, I'm not here to talk you into anything. Because if I could talk you into it, somebody a lot better than me could talk you out of it. Right. I'm here to share my story and to invite you into a journey that maybe will have some relatability to you. And in the process, Jesus always ministered parables and principles. Principles that were wrapped in parables. That's kind of how I've modeled our ministry. Stories that have as a covering scripture and verse. Mm-hmm. And so God just gives us that kind of favor. I mean, I know our limitations. When I go into a school, I ask the principal, tell me where my boundaries are.
Right.
Because I'm under that principal's authority, and I'm not going to go past that. So they tell me, and they go, you know, you can go here. You know, you can do this. And what happens is, because of our You Matter campaign, they see the response and they go, we just had no idea this was going on in our school. Well, I asked the question.
Right.
You know.
All right, so tell me some of the things that have happened.
Yeah, well, spoke at a school where there was a school shooting. A young lady came up to me in a wheelchair. She said, thanks for what you didn't say. As a speaker, that's an interesting sentence. Thanks for what you didn't say. She said, you're the first person who's been here who hasn't talked about the shooting. I said, what's your dream? What do you want to do with your life? She said, well, it's changed. She says, I want to walk again. I said, may I pray for you? She said, yeah. People all over the world pray for that young lady. And Gene, I realized, because I wrote a book about it, that this young lady chose to forgive the guy that shot her. And when she forgave, she put herself in position to receive.
Right.
Well, not only did her principal call me and say, hey, she's getting better. She's in physical therapy out in Los Angeles. She walked across stage on her graduation day. She's since walked in a marathon. Had a young man in Mississippi come up to me after an assembly, public high school, and he said, I had a shotgun. He said, I pulled the trigger 3 times. He said, it wouldn't fire. I had a pistol. He said, I had 5 bullets in the pistol. He said, I pulled the trigger 6 times. It wouldn't fire. He said, I overdosed. They rushed me to the hospital. He said, they pumped my stomach. And then with the most sincere of all looks, he looked at me and said, do you think God has a plan for my life? Yeah, let's go with yeah. Let's go with yeah on this one. And he said, you know, because I heard you tell me that my life matters. And we began to talk about that. And I met a young lady in Missouri who said, she raised her hand when I said, how many here today are dealing with suicide? And she raised her hand, and I went down to her, and the Lord said, go talk to her. So the principal was there with me, and I sat down with this young lady I said, how old are you? 18. And she said, how are you? I saw that you raised your hand. And she looked at me, and she said, do you care?
Yeah.
Do you really care, or are you just asking that question? No, I said, honey, I care. Why would you raise your hand? She said, I'll tell you why. I'm 18 years old. I've been in 22 foster homes. Why did no one want me? And I said, Lord, if you don't give us an answer here, you and I both are going to look really bad.
Right.
And he did. And I said, where are you living now? She smiled. She said, with a foster family that loves me. I said, see, it does work. But I couldn't get her off of my mind. And I shared that little story at a convention, and I shared it the next day in a church where I was ministering. I gave an altar call, and half the church came forward. The next morning, I was in a public high school, 1,700 students. And halfway through it, the Lord speaks to me and says, I want you to tell the story about rejection. The young lady in Missouri.
Right.
I said, you're kidding. Tell the story. I said, okay. He said, now I want you to ask them to raise their hand. I said, Lord, if I do this altar call, they're going to kick me out of this school. He said, they've already kicked me out. Do it.
Oh.
So I did. If you're here today and you're you resonate with this thing of rejection, and you know that you're dealing with it, and you got the guts to say so, when I get to 3, raise your hand. 1,072 teenagers raised their hand. Said, you're talking to me. And the Lord took me to Isaiah 53 and said, you know, right before Jesus was crucified, he was despised and rejected. He's the only one in totality who knows how to get us to the other side of this thing. And so now with teenagers, they come to me and they say, you know, I feel that way. My dad, I had a young man in Vegas say to me, my father has told me since I was 2 years old I was the worst mistake of his life. I've tried to end my life 6 times. How do I forgive him and me? Right. Real stories, real people, great young people that just bought the lie. Just bought the lie.
Right. You know, in all of our study of revivals, God seemed to use the young people first. I remember, I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember the Jesus movement in the 70s and growing up and the hippies, and you know, the statistic I saw was only 40% of those that came to Christ during the quote Jesus movement stayed. Because churches didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to receive it. They didn't know, what do we do with this? And they looked weird. They didn't fit the bill. And you know, there was all of this that happened. We have a tendency as adults to, not that we disregard the youngers, but we go, well, you're not mature yet.
Right.
You don't know.
Wait for your time.
But what you're saying is you're seeing kids are dealing with stuff at a much higher level than parents know.
Oh, when I began 25 years ago, the internet was just coming online.
Right.
Very few, I mean, I was one of the few in a school who had a cell phone. Today, 99% of the students have cell phones. Social media has so radically transformed society as we know it. And teenagers, you know, I heard this the other day that if you're still counting how many likes you get, how many retweets you get. If you're posting something and running to check it out, maybe you don't yet know how much you really do matter. Because is it really about how many retweets you got or how many Facebook likes you got? But yet, in that, young people are finding their value, mistakenly so.
Right.
On this false sense of reality. But then there's also this segment of teenagers out there that I'm seeing that are like, we will take a generation. We do not have to wait till we're 30 years old. I mean, I tell teenagers, I can show you in the best-selling book of all time, there was a 7-year-old who was king of a nation. We might be a little behind here.
Yeah,
you know?
That's right.
You're 18 years old, and you're looking at me going, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life. Here's the most radical question I ask teenagers outside of, is Jesus Lord of your life? Is maybe you don't see anybody doing the one thing that's in your heart to do because we're all waiting on you to go do it.
Yeah.
Why not you?
Why not you?
Why not you? Why not you be the one who starts something so significant in your school that people follow you? Why not? Somebody's going to do it. I promise you. Yeah. I'm not the first person God told to go speak in high schools.
Right.
I just said, okay, I'll go.
Right, right. Revival, all about starting, and you know, one of the things that we talk about here, our slogan here is what? Be the one.
Yep.
That's what we talk about, is you can be the one in your nation, in your neighborhood, in your family that brings revival. In revival, really, there's nothing more to revival. Starts Luke 19:10. The Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. And that's it.
That's it.
That's this whole thing wrapped up in one verse.
So true.
Obviously, you know, in John 3:16, everything falls right in under that. So Dean, as you've gone through and you've seen such miraculous things happen with kids, and you've seen lives turn around before your eyes.
Yes.
You know, kids dealing with stuff. Parents are watching. Grandparents are watching, and they've got troubled kids or troubled grandkids. What do they need to do? Look at this camera right here and tell them, what do they need to do?
I would begin by simply saying this to you. The Bible clearly states in Proverbs, Living Bible, open communication permits progress. Open the lines of communication up. You know, I'm not the most popular parent, you know, in our family when I have to say to our 3 children, no. But that's okay, because I know from my perspective as their dad that I love them with an undying love, and I know what the Lord is telling me to say to and for our children. And part of this process is learning to say to kids, you know what? Not every day is going to be a phenomenal day. There are going to be issues in this thing called life. But with Jesus as the core, the foundation of your life's going to turn around. And as a parent or a grandparent, you may not have all the answers, and that's okay. One of the most honest answers I share with teenagers from stage is, you know what, I don't know. Let me pray about it. Let me get back with you on that. Because I would rather say, I'm not quite sure yet what that answer is, than to say something that isn't correct and bring confusion into their life. I think the most honest times I have with our children, when Lori and I are together with our 3 children, who are now almost adults, through the years, though, was when I would put my cell phone away and I would go spend 30 minutes. We had to go hit a golf ball with my son, or take one of my daughters to ride a horse, or take my other daughter to a gym and watch her do gymnastics, or go swim in the backyard, whatever. Just quality time makes up for a lot. And I meet a lot of parents who beat themselves up and go, well, I was busy making a living. I was providing. And I get that. But God is a way maker, and God is a redeemer of time. So if you've messed up with your young people in your life, it's a pretty easy fix when you go to Jesus and say, hey, I need some help here. Go sit down and talk with them. Listen to them. There's a reason God gave us 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. I listen and watch twice as much as I talk. And I talk a lot. But God has a way of reconnecting and bringing things back together. And I know from very personal experience what the enemy meant for harm. When we yield to what the Word of God says, God will turn that situation to our good every single time. So don't quit. Don't give up. God didn't make a mistake by making you a parent or a grandparent. He's still got a plan that's in action. And those young people in your life need you and what you have to offer.
Amen. That's a good word. And I like what you just said. Because you know what, I think as parents, sometimes we want to give up. Or maybe when we feel like things are not going the right direction.
Right.
you want to give up.
Yeah.
But not giving up is huge.
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. All right, I know you enjoyed Dean Sikes Day. If you want to know more about Dean, I encourage you to visit his website, just youmatter.us. Correct? Youmatter.us, it's right there on the screen, and find out more what Dean does, and find out if you can see when he's coming to your area. Get your kids involved. Maybe you can help support him. The thing for you to remember is what Dean says. I want you to remember what he talked about today. Number one, he talked about the fact he was lost. He lost, I wrote it down, I lost me in the process. And a lot of kids, and I know even in my own family, and some of my stepchildren have got some of those times that they feel like they've been lost. But then he gave his heart to Christ, and he really saw a miracle. God will meet you at your place of greatest need. Even though you prayed the prayer that wasn't what we would say extremely heartfelt, it was more like, hey, if you're real, make it. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. God showed up.
Every time.
God showed up, and he had a plan. And then finally, not only do you need to be the one, but don't give up. That's the point I want you to take today. Be the one, but don't give up.
All those times I sat around and listened to you cry about your mom and how bad you got it. Well, you know what? That was a joke. It was a total joke. And you know what? You're the joke, okay? Because all you're ever going to be is a rich little daddy's girl, okay? A rich little daddy's girl.
Maybe you can relate to hearing words like, you're fat, you're ugly, nobody would miss you if you weren't here, go kill yourself. Those are pretty harsh. And you know what? They're not the truth. Here's the truth. You're special. You are special. You matter. There's something so significantly wonderful about you that if you weren't here, we would all be missing that something special. When you realize that you were created by God, the creator of life, you have to begin to understand, well, why would God make you? The Bible tells us, the best-selling book of all times, in Job chapter 33, verse 4, that it's the Spirit of God who made you and the breath of the Almighty that gave you life. That's why you're here. He created you on purpose. Don't buy the lie. Here's the truth. God loves you. He's got a great plan for your life. And you know what? That plan includes life, not death. So today, choose life.
I know you enjoyed the program today. Go to our website, revivalradiotv.com, or visit our Facebook accounts and whatever, and make sure that you take today, pray over what you just heard today. Let God show you how you can take everything that He shows you today and make it not just a part of your life, but a part of someone else's life. And then you too can be the one. I'll see you.